If you feel lost, you are not broken. You are being summoned, not by the world, but by something deep inside you that refuses to stay silent any longer. Carl Jung once said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." That's not poetry. That's a warning. Because awakening isn't a sunrise, it's a collapse. It begins when everything that used to make sense suddenly doesn't. You wake up one day and the things that once gave you pride, comfort, or direction feel empty. You go through the motions, work, talk, plan, but none of it touches you anymore. It's as if life lost its color, and you can't remember when it happened. You try to fix it with routine, distraction, ambition, but nothing fills the void. And that's the moment the truth starts to whisper. Maybe the life you've been living isn't yours. That's the first crack, the fracture between who you are and who you've been pretending to be. It's terrifying, because it means you must face yourself without the armor of roles, without the illusion of certainty. You begin to sense the abyss, not outside you, but within you. That silent depth that waits when all noise dies down. It doesn't shout, it just stares back. And what you feel in that stare is unbearable, not because it's evil, but because it's honest. This is the stage most people turn away from. They go back to pretending. They patch up the cracks, put the mask back on, and keep moving. But not you. Because if you're still listening, it means you've already seen too much of the truth to go back. You are standing in the space between your old self and the one that's trying to be born. It feels like death because, in a way, it is. It's the death of illusion, the death of comfort, the death of everything that kept you safely asleep. But here's the thing Jung understood better than anyone. The abyss isn't there to destroy you. It's there to reveal you. When you stare into that darkness long enough, you begin to see faint outlines, fragments of your forgotten self, the one you buried under expectations and fear. That's why it hurts so much, because it's you trying to return. And yes, it feels hopeless. Yes, it feels endless. But this is the necessary chaos before clarity. The silence before the first real word of your life. So if you feel lost, let that feeling burn through you. Don't rush to escape it. Don't drown it with noise. Because beneath that confusion, beneath that ache, something ancient in you is stirring. The part that remembers who you truly are. Jung called it individuation, the lifelong process of becoming who you truly are. But he never described it as gentle, because before you can become real, you must first watch the false self die. You've spent years building it, the version of you that fits neatly into what others expect, the persona that knows how to smile when it's breaking, how to speak when it wants to scream, how to keep moving when it's lost all reason to. It's impressive, that mask. It kept you safe. It helped you survive. It convinced the world, and for a while even you, that everything was fine. But deep down, you always knew it was temporary, because the truth has a way of corroding what isn't real. And one day, the cracks begin to show. Maybe it starts with a restlessness you can't explain, a quiet dissatisfaction with the things that used to thrill you, or a sudden awareness that your reflection feels unfamiliar. That's the beginning of collapse. Not dramatic, not loud. Subtle, like the slow crumbling of a wall you once trusted to protect you. The persona begins to weaken under the weight of your unspoken truth. Jung said that the persona is a mask designed on the one hand to make a definite impression upon others, and on the other to conceal the true nature of the individual. But masks always crack under pressure, and life, in its ruthless honesty, will always supply that pressure. When the mask shatters, everything you've buried floods to the surface. The doubts, the insecurities, the unresolved pain. The parts of you labeled wrong or weak, they rise with a vengeance. And suddenly, you realize how fragile your old identity really was. You begin to see how much of your life was performance. How often you said yes when your soul screamed no. How many times you traded authenticity for acceptance. You start to feel the weight of all the times you betrayed yourself just to belong. It's brutal, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. The illusion is gone, and the emptiness beneath it feels unbearable. But this collapse, this inner breaking, is not your end. It's the beginning of your truth. You are not losing yourself. You are losing the I'd of yourself. The version built from other people's opinions, expectations, and fears. The image you wore to be liked, to be needed, to be safe. You're not falling apart. You're being dismantled, piece by piece, by your own honesty. And yes, it hurts, because you're watching the familiar die. But in that death lies the possibility of rebirth. This is what Jung meant when he said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." That's what the collapse is doing. It's revealing what's been silently controlling you all along. Every breakdown, every disillusionment, every internal crisis, they are all messengers. They come to show you what you've outgrown. They come to pull you out of the prison of pretense. And though it feels like everything is being taken from you, what's really happening is this. Everything false is being stripped away so that the real you can finally breathe. This is not destruction. It's purification. The mask is cracking because it's time for you to see yourself clearly. Not who you were taught to be, not who you pretend to be, but who you are when everything else is gone. Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Those words are not poetic comfort. They are a dare. Because to make the darkness conscious, you must first step into it. And that's the part no one warns you about. The descent. The confrontation with everything inside you that you've refused to face. You've spent years outrunning it. The guilt, the envy, the anger, the fear. You called it moving on, but it was just running faster. You thought silence meant peace, but it was suppression. And suppression always has a cost, because what you bury doesn't disappear. It waits. It gathers weight in the corners of your soul, shaping your choices, twisting your reactions, turning you into a stranger to yourself. That's the shadow Jung spoke of, the collection of everything you reject about yourself. Not evil, not monstrous, just unacknowledged. Your denied desires, your hidden shame, your forgotten strength. All the pieces of you that never got permission to exist. When the collapse comes, when the false self begins to crumble, the shadow seizes its moment. It rises, it demands to be seen, and it does not come quietly. It storms through your mind, showing you parts of yourself you never wanted to admit were real. It asks questions that cut. Why do you hide behind kindness? Why do you cling to control? Why do you punish yourself for being human? This is where most turn back. Because the shadow doesn't flatter you. It exposes you. It shows you how much of your life has been built from fear. How often you've chosen comfort over truth. How you've hurt yourself in the name of fitting in. But Jung understood. If you run from your shadow, it owns you. If you face it, it transforms you. The descent is not about destruction. It's about integration. To face the darkness is to reclaim what you've abandoned. You begin to see that your anger holds power, your jealousy holds desire, your fear holds intelligence. Even your pain holds truth. Each piece you accept returns to you with purpose. You stop seeing your flaws as proof of failure and start seeing them as fragments of wholeness. And slowly, something shifts. The darkness stops feeling like an enemy. It becomes a mirror, one that finally shows you everything. This is the quiet revolution Jung spoke of. Not a war between good and evil within you, but a reconciliation between what you show and what you hide. You realize that light and dark are not opposites. They are partners in your becoming. Without one, the other means nothing. So when you find yourself face to face with your shadow, trembling, uncertain, ashamed, don't turn away. Look closer. Because what you fear most is the key to what you are missing. The descent into shadow is the passage every real transformation demands. It will test your courage, your honesty, your capacity to bear truth without collapsing. It will strip away your illusions and show you the raw architecture of your humanity. And when you emerge, not pure but whole, you will no longer be haunted by what you were hiding. You will walk with it beside you, integrated, unapologetic, alive, because the goal was never to destroy the darkness. It was to learn to hold it without being consumed. And when you can do that, nothing, not fear, not doubt, not loss, can ever rule you again. You've fallen through the collapse. You've stared into the shadow. You've walked through the ruins of everything you thought you were. Now you're here, standing in the stillness after the storm. It's not peace you feel yet. It's emptiness. But don't mistake that emptiness for nothingness. It's space. Space where your truth can finally begin to take shape. This is the turning point. The invisible line between the self that was built and the self that is being born. Jung said that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But privilege doesn't mean ease. Becoming real means burning everything false. And that fire leaves scars. Yet those scars are proof that you were brave enough to face yourself. In this space, the noise quiets. The opinions that once ruled you lose their hold. You stop chasing what doesn't belong to you. You begin to see that the things you once called purpose were often just distractions from the deeper work, the work of becoming whole. It feels strange at first, doesn't it? To live without pretending, to exist without explanation, to let silence replace constant striving. You start to notice how often you've been guided by fear. The fear of being misunderstood, of being invisible, of failing. And suddenly, you see how much of your identity was built on avoiding pain, avoiding rejection, avoiding truth. But avoidance is no longer an option. Because once you've seen your shadow, you can't go back to blindness. You can't unknow yourself. And that's the power of this moment. You're no longer chasing light or running from darkness. You're beginning to stand in both. This is where clarity begins to form, not as an epiphany, but as a quiet certainty. A knowing that doesn't shout, but anchors you. A voice that says, you don't need to become someone new. You need to remember who you are. It's subtle but profound. The shift from seeking to seeing. From fixing to facing. From waiting to acting. You start to understand that life isn't something happening to you. It's something unfolding through you. And everything that once felt like betrayal or failure now reveals itself as initiation. Because what if the emptiness you've been fearing is actually freedom? What if the confusion is just your old self losing its grip? What if being lost was never a punishment, but a preparation? That's the secret Jung left behind. You don't find meaning by searching for it. You create it by living in alignment with what is real, no matter how uncomfortable that truth is. And so, at the turning point, you face a choice. You can go back, rebuild the mask, pretend you never saw the truth, return to the comfort of illusion. Or you can step forward, into the unknown, into the raw, unfiltered experience of being fully alive. It won't be easy. It will demand honesty, courage, and patience. But if you take that step, if you dare to live without pretending, you begin to move with life, not against it. And that's when things change. Not suddenly, but profoundly. You begin to feel a quiet power rising within you, not the power of control, but the power of acceptance, not the kind that conquers the world, but the kind that no longer needs to. This is the moment Jung meant when he spoke of individuation, the moment the inner war ends, and you stop being a stranger to yourself. You realize that everything you were running from, the pain, the confusion, the loss, was not the obstacle. It was the doorway. And now, standing on the threshold of who you are becoming, you understand the truth that changes everything. You were never lost. You were only being led, through the dark, through the collapse, through the silence, back to yourself. You've crossed the threshold. The air feels different here, thinner, sharper, alive. The noise of the old world still echoes behind you, but it no longer commands your attention. Because something within you has shifted, quietly, irreversibly. You've seen what lies beneath the surface. You've met your shadow. You've watched the mask fall apart. And now, from the wreckage, a new strength begins to rise. Not the kind the world celebrates, loud, polished, untouchable, but the kind born from ruin, the kind that knows exactly how much it can endure and still stand tall. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." And that's where true strength begins, not in dominance, not in control, not in perfection, but in radical acceptance of all that you are. Because strength isn't the absence of weakness. It's the courage to live without denial. You start to see that the pain you fought against for so long wasn't your enemy. It was your teacher. Every wound carved depth into you. Every failure stripped away another layer of illusion. Every fall made you less fragile, more real. The world taught you to avoid suffering. Jung taught you to learn from it. Because what you most need to grow is often hidden in the places you least want to look. So you look. You sit in silence with your pain and realize it doesn't destroy you anymore. You can hold it, like a stone in your hand, heavy, but no longer unbearable. And that's when you understand. You've stopped fighting yourself. The war is over. What emerges in its place is something steady, grounded, a kind of quiet power that doesn't shout, doesn't prove, doesn't perform. It simply is. You begin to notice how clarity replaces chaos, how peace starts to flicker in moments that used to unravel you, how your choices begin to align with your truth, not your fear. And people might not understand it. They might say you've changed. But what they don't see is that you haven't changed. You've returned. Returned to your center. Returned to your integrity. Returned to the part of you that doesn't need approval to exist. You start to carry yourself differently. not with arrogance, but with quiet certainty. You know who you are now, not because someone told you, but because you earned it, by walking through fire and refusing to turn away. This is the rebirth of strength Jung spoke of, not the strength of the ego, but of the integrated self. The strength that comes from embracing your contradictions instead of fighting them. The strength of knowing that wholeness is not purity, it's complexity. You no longer chase happiness as if it's something to win. You understand now that meaning is deeper, that it grows from struggle, honesty, and the willingness to feel everything fully. And you realize the very things you once cursed, your confusion, your despair, your loss, were the hands that shaped you. They didn't ruin you. They refined you. So you no longer fear pain. You no longer resent uncertainty. You face them with a kind of reverence because they brought you here, to this strange, fierce peace that cannot be taken away. You've been through the descent. You've been dismantled and remade. And now, standing at the edge of your new beginning, you carry a truth that no one can give or take. You are no longer searching for strength. You are it. And when you finally realize that, the world, for the first time, feels wide open. Not because it has changed, but because you have. You are not the same. You are awake. This is where the journey turns to flame, where everything you've endured, the collapse, the shadow, the silence, gathers into one single moment of clarity. You did not come this far just to understand your pain. You came this far to transcend it. You've walked through hell, and you learned its language. You've faced your reflection, and didn't look away. Now comes the part that demands everything, the part where you rise. Carl Jung said, "The greatest and most important problems of life are all fundamentally insoluble. They can never be solved, but only outgrown. You can't solve your pain. You outgrow it by becoming larger than what broke you. And you have. You don't need to prove it. You don't need to announce it. You just know. Because the person who once begged for answers has become the answer. You've learned that strength isn't forged in comfort. It's built in confrontation. You've learned that peace isn't found. It's earned through truth. And you've learned that the darkness you feared was never there to punish you. It was there to prepare you. Now you rise, not in rage, not in defiance, but in power, the quiet kind, the kind that doesn't seek validation, the kind that moves with intention, not desperation. Because you've seen what's real now. You've seen that the world doesn't reward authenticity. It tests it. It challenges it. It strips it bare. And yet here you are, still standing, stripped of illusion, but full of truth. That's what rising really means. Not floating above pain, but standing taller because of it. Not pretending you're healed, but walking forward with your scars. Visible, honest, earned. You no longer chase meaning, you embody it. You no longer wait for permission, you give it. You no longer fear being seen, because you've seen yourself, and that is enough. This is the rebirth Jung hinted at. Not a return to who you were, but an emergence of who you were meant to be all along. Someone unafraid of silence, unafraid of uncertainty, unafraid of depth. And yes, the world will still test you. You'll still stumble. You'll still doubt. But the difference now is this. You won't mistake the storm for your undoing. You'll know it's just another layer being burned away, because you no longer collapse when things fall apart. You rebuild, deliberately, consciously, from the inside out. You rise, not as an image, but as a presence, not as someone who found themselves, but as someone who became themselves. And when others look at you, they'll sense it, that calm